Welcome to Deloitte Tech Talks. I'm your host, Raquel Buscaino, and I lead Deloitte's Novel and Exponential Technologies team, where we sense and make sense of emerging tech. Today on Tech Talks, we're diving deep into the world of humanoid robotics and physical AI, a technology set that's transforming from sci-fi, fantasy to everyday reality faster than you might imagine. If you've ever wondered how robots could move from beyond assembly lines and into our daily environments, this episode can provide some insight. On today's show, we're going to unpack not just where robotics technology is today, but how businesses and employees can integrate these intelligent machines into their workflows. So whether you're a tech leader asking, how can physical robots enhance my team's capabilities? Or you're simply curious about the future of human-machine collaboration, by the end of this conversation, you'll have a fresh perspective on the robotic revolution happening right now. I'm thrilled to be joined on today's episode by Franz Gilbert, the growth leader for human capital ecosystems, to discuss where robotics are today and where the future is heading tomorrow. Franz, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So the topic of the day is humanoid robotics. What does that mean?
It sounds incredibly elementary to say it, but I mean, it really has to do with, at one level, the form factor, right? Does it have arms? Does it have legs? Does it look like something that we think is a human? The second piece is a little bit more, does it interact with us in a human way? What's the interaction model look like? Is it able to talk with us, converse with us, co-work with us? And I think the industry right now is still at the form factor layer. And I think it's going to be more of just, how does it work with us? And I think that's going to be the future of the humanoid side.
But why a humanoid form? What might be some of the reasons people might want to need robots to have that human-esque form or resemblance?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. So there's two reasons for it. The one idea is everyone thinks we just did it because we just want replicas. The reality is, if you think about the market for robots, you're going to go through all the capital expenditure. I mean, because companies have invested millions upon millions in terms of developing these. There's a huge army of mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, AI scientists that are making these robots work, right? So the question is then, how do you get the most of the market as a result of that? Well, in a lot of places, you have to have a humanoid capability to operate in the physical spaces that we do, right? So if you think about a manufacturing environment, we've got wires, we've got stairs, we've got different rooms that we've designed our world around humans. And so if you want your market potential, if you want to sell robots, you either have to get a market that's going to redesign their buildings and the way they do work for this new form factor, or you create a robot that can use existing tools.
I mean, it makes so much sense. We've designed our world for humans. Therefore, human-formed robots would be the best and most suitable to be able to navigate the world that we've created.
And it's fun because the industry has also learned, because there's an assumption of, we have to follow the entire humanoid form. And there's this amazing person, her name's Melanie Wise. She's really one of the frontier scientists in terms of how humanoid robotics. And she came upon this where she goes, okay, we have to follow the humanoid form, but do I have to do it exactly? So I'll give you an example. In a company that does warehousing, well, when we bend our knees go forward. Right. So as a result, if we're bending down to go pick something up at a lower level, we have to be stepping back 20 to 24 inches because we have to allow the knees. And that's just the human form, the way it's operated. Well, she went, well, what if I turn the knees backwards? Right.
So interesting.
Because now she can actually move the body up and down, be 6 inches away, bend her knees and actually go down by changing it. So I think that's the next stage where they're kind of figuring that out.
Yeah. As part of the conversation, also how humanoids might interact with other robots. Because today, I actually think that robots are a part of our lives in very meaningful and significant ways sometimes. What do you think that future looks like between robot to robot communication, if you will, let alone the robot to human communication that I think we're focusing on?
I think we're going to get there quickly. In this case, I'm specifically talking about the humanoid robotics environment. The majority of the industry is focused on how do we truly make those robots work. There's some technical challenges they're still working through: battery power, power lift ratio, balance in terms of falling down, some safety issues that they're working on. The next piece is, how do we do fleet management? How do we get the robots deploying, go do this, go do that kind of a situation? They haven't gotten to Well, I'm going to start connecting the robot into a broader environment. So like, how am I connected into a physical plant CCTV? What does that look like? Am I connected into other systems? And so I think that's once we get the robots deployed in a service environment, this is also where the industry is going to change. If you think about the industry, most of them are the manufacturers. How do I build the car, right? What you're now talking about is, okay, now how do I integrate the car into the work environment? How do I integrate the robot? And I think there's going to be another wave of technology firms that are doing that type of system integration work, because a lot of it is how do we tie robots into all those operational systems?
I'd love to get a sense from you. What are the industries that you think are most prime to use humanoids in the near future?
Yes.
Maybe even a follow-up question. If I'm an exec, a decision maker at a company, what would be the questions I'd ask myself to determine, should I be thinking about humanoid robotics as part of my strategy?
The first piece is right now, it's really being driven by the manufacturers. And what they're looking for is use cases that allow them to continue to finalize what the humanoids robotics do in terms of form factor, capability. And so as a result, they're looking for highly repeatable use cases. Like, can I pick up a piece of cardboard? Can I pick up something that's squishy? How do I move it? And so as a result, warehouse and logistics are kind of the two primary sectors. And it has nothing to do with actually warehouse and logistics. It has everything to do with the use cases, highly repeatable motions. And they know that industry had already done cobots and AMRs, right? There's a lot of other things they did. So the humanoid robotics, they know will be accepted in that industry, but it has to do more with proving it. The second wave is going to be, where can we deploy robots in sectors that have a massive workforce shortage, where it's one where you need to optimize the mix of, am I using human talent in the right way? And I think sectors like healthcare, clinical healthcare is going to be a major place where we can do this. Do I want an RN doing bed checks? Can it be a humanoid or some ambulatory or some other sort of hybrid version? But let's use the humans for the highest value purpose. Now, your other question of, if I'm an executive, should I be thinking about this? And the answer is yes. So the way I think about it is, and these numbers aren't perfect, but it just kind of paints the mental picture, is right now, the number of human robots in the United States is in the tens. Next year will be in the hundreds because they're handmade. So it's, how do I start doing contract manufacturing? 3 years from now, it's going to be in the thousands. Well, if you go, the horizon for this being deployed in some scale version is in the 3 to 5. Well, clients are going to be building physical plants. They're like, okay, I'm building new warehouses, building new buildings. Should I be thinking about what I need to do to adopt robotics in that? Second thing, as I look about innovation and deployment, how can I accelerate robot adoption better? Third thing is, what's my workforce look like? Do I need to be thinking about, where am I placing buildings? What type of talent am I doing? And the last is really understanding what that adoption plan would look like. Every company is going to be different on where should you be exploring robotics first, and what does that mean in terms of your long-range workforce plan? My opinion is, every company should be thinking about it now, developing an understanding of, when they think they could be playing. And in some places, they could be integrating it into their long-range plans, but not every company is going to have a robot in play next year.
It's so helpful to hear about the time horizon, because I think part of the conversation we're having right now is, what's hype and where is it all heading? Because sometimes you can get caught up with the technology buzzword of the year and want to know, well, when's it going to come down the pipe, and should I be thinking about it now? But it's good to hear your perspective that thinking about it now and it will continue to grow.
That's the piece that I'm entirely confident about, which is, we as Deloitte, we have the pleasure of working with a lot of the manufacturers. And when you look at the scale problems that they've got, I give kind of a couple of them. So one is they've got a safety issue of that when robots, they fall and they're 175 pounds. And they don't want it to fall on a human, right? So a key piece of our scale is I need to have a robot that can work next to a human to make this happen. So how do we make them fall safely? And the second is the battery charging. They need bigger charges, longer charges. Well, the normal way to do it is you go a bigger battery. Well, that just increases the weight, which increases the drain. So they're looking at how do you optimize the battery and the charging systems. And there's a couple other ones. When you look at the industry, they are solving it, right? And as a result, the scale is going to happen. It's exciting.
Paul Graham has this quote I like: the best time to invest in an exponential and is when it feels a little bit too early. I feel that quote applies here.
Exactly.
You had mentioned a couple considerations for robots, making them safe when they fall, the battery charging life so that they can integrate seamlessly into our lives. I think a big piece of this is also trust. So how does trust factor into the equation here? How might organizations drive adoption here?
When I talk about humanoid robotics, realize most of that's the form factor. Can it work? Can it do things? Most of them still are going to be supervised robotics. They're going to be autonomous, 70% of the time, 80% of the time, 90%, but they're still going to get stuck. And so you're still going to see people remoting into the robot and literally driving the robot behind the scenes. When you think about the trust layer, there's actually two versions of it. So for the next 5 years, most of the time, most of the robotics are going to have a human backup behind the scenes. So our enterprise is okay with having a robot in their environment that can see everything, which means there's a remote human behind it. Think about like a hospital environment. It's one thing if I were to tell you the robot is 100% self-contained, electronically, all data records digitized. But if you have a human somewhere elsewhere that remotes in to provide support, well, how do you trust the person remoting in? And I think that's going to be the environment that we're going to have to figure out over the next couple of years. What's that remoting and fleet management operations look like? I think the longer term is, are we okay with a robot that's fully autonomous in our environment? And I think long as you're making it clear as to, just like anybody else, who's doing what job, right? Then it's no different than if you bring in another employee in, right? I mean, if you're a 4-person shop and all of a sudden a 5th person shows up at work, everyone's like, do we have a problem?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I don't think it's going to be any different than, you've got a 4-person shop and all of a sudden a robot shows up.
Is the robot making my life better, easier?
Yeah.
Just as a new colleague might. Of course, I'm going to love the new colleague if they make my life a little bit easier or better in some fashion.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered quite a bit. We've got use cases, we've got industries, time horizon. We've done a lot on this podcast. Now I want to stretch a little bit into the future. Imagine it's 10 years down the line. What are the second and third order effects of this adoption that people might not be thinking about?
So what's the long range implications here? Right now, we're focused on how are robots going to do the work. The second piece is there is workforce shortage across the United States and around the world, that the robots are going to do. And as we get into the future, and this is where the theorists start, having some interesting questions. There's a whole lot of scenarios that people have been trying to think through, but they're really long range. So from a scenario planning, we as Deloitte, we're focused on more of the short term of, how do we serve our clients? What does that look like now? And then the futurists, the theorists of the world, will be kind of figuring out those long-term implications.
As we wrap up here, what do you think is most exciting about the time we're in right now for the industry? Why is now the best time to be having this conversation?
I think there's two. One is for people in the industry, I'm so excited to see the combination of software engineering, EEs, MEs, a whole bunch of engineering disciplines are coming together to make robotics happen. So just one, for those in the profession, it's just really cool to kind of see them have their day. Piece number two is I think for, operations innovators, folks that are kind of on the business side, it's an amazing time to reimagine what a mechanized environment looks like, right? So in this regard, it's not just humanoid robotics, but where do drones fit in? What does that do to, how do we deliver things? There's just a lot of fun times to reimagine business models. And so for those individuals, we're now in that time. We're going to reimagine. We've got to do the modeling. How do you do the innovation? So it's the perfect time to start playing with this.
Franz, thank you so much for such a great discussion. I really feel like I learned so much in just our time together.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
To all our tech-savvy listeners out there, if you enjoyed this episode, please share and subscribe. And if you'd like to learn more about humanoid robotics, you can follow myself and Franz to stay up to date. Our socials are listed in the episode description. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on our next episode. Until then, stay savvy.